So even before we dive into terms that are related to cryptography, I want to take a brief walk through history and begin to understand the key events that led us to here. This will give you some good background color on the whole thing. And I'm taking a lot of this from my other courses, including blockchain and artificial intelligence. So some of those key figures will turn up there as well. And it all begins with a very simple question, maybe a question you may have never pondered. And that is, when in history did people start to think of data as being important? When did they start to realize the true importance of data? Well, the importance of data and keeping it secure and the benefits associated with the stealing of other people's data actually goes back to way before the term data was even used in common lexicon. We've been sending secret messages to each other since the dawn of verbal communication, of course. However, this took on a completely another level of significance when we started to appreciate how knowledge was also linked to power, especially on the battlefield, when vital pieces of intelligence needed to be passed between generals and armies. There were very early methods of getting covert messages across in a battlefield situation. And although not too sophisticated, they're still ingenious, if not quite hilarious. Here's the first one in action. It was recorded by Herodotus around 430 BC that one military general had a very innovative way of keeping secret messages and getting them across to the army. He could send text instructions and even graphics across hundreds of miles in 430 BC in an encrypted way, without the messenger even having to understand or utter a single word at the other end, maybe not even knowing what the message was themselves. The method was that they would shave the head of the messenger, they would tattoo the instructions or new plans on the head of this messenger, and then wait for that messenger's hair to grow back again. The messenger, of course, would then be sent across their long journey to the far-off land where the intended recipient was at the other end. Now, at the other end, the messenger would have seemingly nothing on their person of value at all. There would be no sign of anything useful upon their person. But when their head was shaved, the message could be clearly revealed in all its glory. As was noted at the time, the diagrams or messages penciled on someone's bonds did have to be quite succinct, as there was limited canvas to play with. So you can see this form of encryption, although ingenious, had very low bandwidth or storage capacity. Unsurprisingly, the methods reached a new level of complexity and sophistication after that. In fact, one encryption method came later on, and it's actually named after the Roman emperor who created it. The Caesar Cipher is a common term known to cryptologists, and it is a technique that allowed the leader to communicate with his armies in an encrypted way. Julius Caesar wrote his messages in a way that shifted the letters of the alphabet to the right a number of pre-agreed steps, so that the message made absolutely no sense at all to the casual observer. However, the recipient, who of course would be privy to the key regarding how many letters to offset, would then be able to decipher the gibberish. Okay, when we describe it today, it seems like a ridiculously simple one to work out. But remember the context and the age we're talking about here. At that time, this was incredibly sophisticated. Very few people even knew how to read. So this is at the time was the cutting edge of encryption technology. By the way, the simple technique that I've just described allows us to absorb an actual cybersecurity term. The method where both the sender and the recipient have the same key is known as symmetric encryption. And that's a term you'll come across. So that's like giving someone the key to your house. The same key opens it, which locked it. When the key to encrypt and the key to decrypt the message is different, that, in security terms, is known as asymmetric encryption. And that's something to remember for later on. We'll come back to that. I'm quickly whizzing through history here, but around the time of the First World War, people started to become obsessed with the idea of cryptography and encryption. Entire teams were set up of mathematicians and abstract thinkers to devise more and more new and complex ways to relay hidden messages. The nirvana at this stage of the game was to achieve some form of asymmetric encryption, one where you wouldn't actually have to send the key to the other end at all, and yet still have the content secret at all times and be able to allow the recipient to open that message. How do you get a message across, or even something of value from you, the sender, to the recipient at the other end, without having the content compromised and without sending the key? That was tricky. And this was one of the first puzzles that needed to be overcome in the First World War. Someone then had a brainwave, and this is how they would do it. Firstly, we want to send something valuable. Now, for the sake of an example, let's make something easy to visualize. So let's say it's a valuable gem which is locked in a box. Okay, now we may want to send it to someone we haven't met yet. And this is essentially how emails work. But the tricky thing here is that we don't ever want to send the key. So how on earth do we get them to see the contents of the box? The solution was genius in its construct, and it goes something like this. Firstly, we lock the box with a padlock, and we send the box across the land to the recipient. The recipient, on receiving the box, of course, can't open it because it's locked. It's padlocked and they don't have that key. So now what they need to do is put a second padlock on it and then send the entire box back again to the original sender. So now the box is returned with two padlocks. I, as the sender, of course, can only unlock one of the padlocks, my one, which I then do. Now I send the box back. The box at this stage is still locked, but this time it is locked with the other person's padlock. Now, this time when the recipient gets the box, they can unlock the padlock that they put on it, and they already have the key for that. So they are able to unlock it and see what is inside the box. Can you see what happened there? How cool is that? At no point in the journey was the box ever unlocked. No key ever needed to be sent. And the item was transported privately. Now imagine that box to be an encrypted email or a piece of data or some digital piece of value, or even a device. The valuable gem is now a digital contract, a sensitive document, a currency, or something else of value in a digital format. The padlocks are passwords, with the key being alphanumeric code or a mathematical algorithm. So now we have the basis of a very simple yet robust encryption method, and one which stems down through history into our digital world today. So I'm not asking you to remember that, but I'm just asking you to visualize it so that you understand, there is a logic to the way these people think. They have to come up with more and more ingenious methods of being able to relay data in a very secure form to help us in this world of cybersecurity. Multiply this genius level by a factor of 100 in terms of complexity and sophistication, and you're starting to approach the cryptography geniuses like Alan Turing, the people who worked at Bletchley Park and who decoded the German war machine with the Enigma project. Now multiply that genius again, and you have the level of intellectual prowess that came from a UK mathematician called Clifford in 1973. Stay with me, because then our journey becomes closer to where we want to go. Remember, at this point, I'm just getting you into the mindset of cryptographers, people who start to think about security of data. We haven't started to think about hackers or how the methods they use, none of that yet. I'm just taking you through the steps in time. It's 1973. GCHQ in Britain, they've been trying to create a near foolproof encryption method for their own communication systems for years. But either their methods fell short or their maths fell short. They simply couldn't do it. They handed the task over to a chap called Clifford Cox, a young maths prodigy, really. He was only 23 at the time in 1973. He went home that night with the problem and he contemplated it. In a matter of 3 hours, it occurred to him that he had solved the problem, which his peers had been focusing on for years. He'd solved it in his head because, of course, the problem now was if you work for GCHQ, you're not authorized to write anything down on paper. GCHQ forbids this. So this chap had to hold it in his memory, this solution that he came up with that night, and hope that the whole solution wouldn't simply fade overnight and that it would stay with him till the morning. It did. His invention would be called Public Key Cryptography Algorithm, and it is still in use today. It forms the basis of modern encryption. So you can see that the whole history of the hiding and revealing of data, of sharing and stealing of data goes way back and would have huge implications in both military strategy and other commercial applications. But when it all started, it was all about nation versus nation. And this was really a time when hackers didn't exist because our personal data wasn't exposed in any real way. So how did the average Joe on the street make an appearance? When did the rogue individuals come onto the scene? Individuals who could be based in a bedroom somewhere or a garage and yet could become a player on this huge international stage of global corporate IT. How was the hacker born? Let's go there now.